We're on this computer. Okay, so we are now recording. Welcome, everyone. My name is Allison Henline, and I am the Education and Outreach Manager for the Shaker Historical Society located in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I am joined again, this is the second and final part in our speaker series with the AIM movement. And I'm joined by Jeff Pierce and Robert Roche, who are going to be talking to you a little bit about the history of the Cleveland chapter of AIM and just kind of following on from what we discussed last week in the first part in this series. So without further ado, I'm going to let them kind of take it over. And if you have any questions or comments during this talk, please feel free to put them into the chat at any time. And I will do my best to answer them, or not answer them, to ask them of the people that you see here. So without further ado, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. So picking up from what we talked about last week, do you remember exactly where we left off?
I do not. I remember the last couple of things we talked about. We talked about Russel Means and his contributions to the movement, to starting the movement. And then we talked a little bit about, we started to get into some of the things that happened in Cleveland and the how the Cleveland chapter of AIM formed. And we talked about a lot about relocation, forced relocation.
That's what I thought. That's exactly where I thought we left off.
Okay, so
we can
take
talk
it away.
about relocation into Cleveland and how that really impacted our community here.
Oh boy, yeah, I touched a little bit about it because I spoke of Thomas, who was the Bureau of Indian Affairs person here in Cleveland. His office was in the federal building. And just to make clear what his position was, he absolutely did nothing.
So going back from it, so relocation is a system set up by the US government to try and entice American Indians off the reservation and into urban cities to try and well, it was under the guise of you'll be able to have a much better life and make more money and enjoy everything better. But what it wound up doing was just dumping you somewhere and you got zero from it. You might get a really crappy apartment, but I don't even think they did that.
You didn't get that. It was a one-way ticket, first of all. And the goal was to divide and conquer. But what I mean by that is the families were spread out east, west, and south. Some of them went to Columbus, but not really. Cleveland and Lorain at that time had, steel mills and had job opportunities. And the purpose of the relocation program was to change or to educate the young people coming in, but they ran into a problem because it's called communications. A lot of those people from the Navajo and Sioux reservations didn't speak English at all. And the change that they wanted, meaning the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that they wanted was assimilation. So a lot of people came here from the north, from the south, southern reservations, northern reservations, and were pretty much stranded. So the American Indian Center, formed by Russel Means in 1969, the goal at that time was to get people back home, which is what he did. We did, and that was our goal: was to if we could find job opportunities, which were very slim, and that's when protesting took place and changed it. Or if they could, if they could just handle 2 or 3 jobs trying to support their families, which was really hard to do. So in the earlier days, the Bureau of Indian Affairs offered 2 goals. There was, for the women, they could be court stenographers. Of course, I don't know any Native that took that program that absolutely benefited from it and have used it, of course, in the future. The second, because tribal courts are different. And the second part of that was that the males were taught welding. Well, welding it's a good job. It's a hardworking job, but it doesn't give the families an opportunity to move forward with education, or move forward with good job opportunities because they're unskilled and uneducated. And in a lot of cases, they didn't speak English very well. And I remember in the earlier days when people were coming in, when I met Russ, when I met a lot of people when they were coming in, they didn't speak English. not only that, but they had no idea what the system meant. When you spoke of the system, so you're here living in Cleveland, you're from two worlds, you live on a reservation, you live a totally different life. And then you come to Cleveland, and at that time, we were surrounded with a Hispanic community moving in from New York because they had cut their funding for, food stamps for everything. They just, so these people came to Cleveland because there were opportunities here. But in the process, you had good elements and bad elements. There were gang wars right around in the neighborhood. Now, our neighborhood, which I mentioned last time, the relocation was we finally situated ourselves between West 25th, Detroit Avenue, Jefferson Avenue, and Rocky River. That's the core of our community, and it still is. But in that area, surrounding that area, you go outside and there'd be people shooting at each other, gang wars, drive-bys. I mean, it was really dangerous. It was really bad. And then the Cleveland police finally got control or handle on it probably about 5 or 6 years later. But it was a war zone then. So once they relocated, we had two buildings. We originally had one building. It's called in the what's the name of that church? It's Episcopal Church on Church Avenue off of West 25th, and that's where I actually met Russ. And that's the basement was used as an Indian center. And then we finally moved to 55th and Lorraine, and that was the center. That was the community that was the center for the community up until 1985, when I mentioned Jerome Wetzel Warcloud eventually sold the building, which he has no right to do under nonprofit law. But during that time, Russ had developed a lot of programs, even Warcloud. Warcloud did a lot for the community. But for the most part, right in the back of our minds, we're still dealing with relocation. We're still dealing with the people that were still coming up, that continue to come up to Cleveland, some of them were dying in the streets. I remember a woman that had no heat. She didn't have any electricity. It was 1978. And she had 2 or 3 children and never said anything to us, even though she came to the center and got a little bit of food, until we went over there one day and realized, what I don't know even how she survived that, how she was living there without the heat. And that was the worst storm we had in 1978. She was tough. She was a Seneca woman, I believe. Linda Claus. I don't know if you remember her. She passed on. So any of the people that I use names with, they've already passed on, for the most part.
But with relocation came a lot of problems as well, like, dietary changes. We talked last week about a lot of the health problems facing Indigenous communities on reservations and off reservations. We know a family here eats crap, bags and bags of chips. He's severely diabetic. He's had how many heart attacks? I know you know exactly what I'm talking about.
He said 9 heart attacks. Most of the staple for people coming to Cleveland was fried bread. So keep going, and then I'll explain what fried bread, how that came about.
We never ate processed foods on reservations. We never ate everything we ate, you killed or you grew. And then when the government came in and told you what to do, you're getting bags of flour with maggots and worms and crap in it, or not getting anything at all. So out of that became a staple Indian food called fry bread. You can explain what fry bread is.
Right. Well, you are correct. The Indians lived off the land, and once they were interned on these reservations, they weren't allowed to leave the reservations. A good example was Geronimo.
Correct.
So in some cases they were shot. They were shot. Not in some cases they were shot if they left. So
it wasn't suggested you stay.
Yeah, the government food that they gave was cheese, which was a commodity. And again, the flour, but also meat, pork, and the pork was so rotten that it wasn't usable. But what they did is they boiled it to get the juices out of it, and that's what they use for the fried bread. So they would boil the beef or the pork, mostly pork, and then that was used. That was a part of the process of frying it in fried bread. That's where they got the lard, or if you want to call it lard, or you call it the oils, and that's what they used. So you have a staple that is not healthy for you. You know, it's fried food in the worst kind of grease that you could possibly imagine. Although it did have maybe ground beef, and it had some vegetables, meaning lettuce and tomato, etc. But it was also a main staple up here. So diabetes type 2, as you said, is rampant. It's still rampant. 80%,
Heart failure.
80% of our community has it. You know, and I'm 74, but you know, I've stayed away from fried foods anyway, and I don't go to fast foods because I knew it wasn't healthy. It was pretty obvious that it wasn't healthy, but it was all that they could afford to eat. So,
Well, yeah, because it's cheap. It's all you were given.
So you had unemployment, you had illiteracy, you have
Obesity,
again,
suicide rates,
suicide the highest, in
double the
United
national
States,
average.
highest, unbelievable.
Domestic violence,
And domestic violence. I mean, you name it, we had it,
and still do.
it took years. I remember Community Relations Board years ago started working with us because the Cleveland Police Department would tell our community if there was some kind of confrontation or some kind of conflict, that the police came to the house, and they would tell the community, they would tell the people there, we don't do anything because you people to handle your own problems. And it took probably 2 years working with city council and finally community relations board for them to understand that, hey, we live here in this city, we vote, and we live here, and we're just a part of the city as everyone else. And we expect law enforcement to provide the services that we need. We expect Department of Human Services to provide that. We expect medical care. Now, one of the problems with that is that, first of all, I probably mentioned this before, about 78% of all natives live off the reservation. So relocation was a success. Get us off the reservations, take the land, 28% of the land, 28% of natural resources are on Indian land. And with that being said, you have health problems. Now, for most tribal members that are tribally enrolled, so I had to clarify that, the IHS, Indian Health Services, is available. However, if you're in need of a heart or a lung or a liver,
they can't help you.
You have to go back to the reservation and sometimes stay for 90 days before you qualify. They cannot and they will not help you up here. So there's no reservations in Ohio. Now, Michigan was a different story. They had Indian Health Services. And I used to take natives from Cleveland. We drive them to Michigan to take advantage of whatever advantage they could of the health services. But when it came to organ transfers and that had to be transplants. It had to take place on the reservations. And for the most part, and I've seen individuals go back home to get a kidney or to get a heart and die before they qualified under the policies and guidelines.
Well, not to mention the junk doctors that work there.
Well, yeah, they had
butchers.
Most of them didn't speak English, let alone couldn't understand Native Americans, their language, and didn't understand their culture and tradition. And that plays a big part of medicine in our community. So, you're not getting the quality care that you may get on a setting here, such as Cleveland, depending on the hospital and services you use. Certainly better than anything that IHS has to offer.
And all this ties into the American Indian movement in a modern sense, an important way, because a lot of what we do with the American Indian movement is activism work, and a lot of policies have been, changed or considered, or, you can't get anything accomplished without, starting from somewhere. So the American Indian movement has been integral in trying to get as much reform as possible. The problem becomes running up against Washington bureaucrats and numbers of other hard to deal with people. Greed and corruption is a very hard thing to fight when you can't pay more. Do we have any questions so far?
We did just get a very long, I'm trying to read it really quickly before I say whether it's a question or a comment. Okay, so it's kind of a long question, but there's some context to it. So this is from Mike, and he asks, not to intrude or to be seen as fostering hostility between cultures, but the policies of assimilation through dilution, i.e. breed the red or black out of them, separating children from their parents, etc., have been used against Indigenous populations the world over. However, the U.S. is notable for allowing Amish and Mennonites to live in many ways as a separate country within the U.S. borders, extending to many religious practices, including education, healthcare, and crime. The degree of tolerance extended to the Amish by white America seems to be in contrast to the intolerance for Indian culture. What do you think drives that difference?
Greed, land.
I was exactly words
go ahead,
right out of my mouth. Greed and land. There are so many untapped resources on reservation land that they can't access because it's under someone who lives there, which again breeds tribal corruption, because what do you do to get people to move off the land? You can either A, forcibly remove them, B, scare them into leaving, or C, wait for them to die. Either way, all three of them have been accomplished at some point in history. Number two, it's interesting you make the comparison between Amish, Mennonite, and all that with American Indians. Well, yes, in theory and in legality, Indian reservations are sovereign nations. We have our own set of laws. We have our own tribal councils. We have our own police force. However, that being said, we have to be under the direction of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and bureaucrats in Washington, for a number of stupid reasons. And like I went into in the last video, like Pine Ridge is still prisoner of war camp number 44. If you look it up in, I think it's the Defense Department or.
It's Department of War. BIA is a part of the Department of War, by the way.
Which that's, you know that? I did, which is Bureau of Indian Affairs. And if, believe me, if the government could get every Indian off the reservation tomorrow to get the resources, they would. They absolutely would. And they've tried. They did it in Oak Flats in Arizona. They're
still doing it.
They are still doing it. They did it. And this is where AIM really comes in handy. They tried to bulldoze a cemetery that's on tribal land that has tribal families buried there, because there was a little bit of oil underneath it. They think. They don't know because they can't do the groundwork because there's corpses there. Standing Rock, North Dakota. There is a pipeline. Everyone is probably pretty acutely aware of that issue.
Black Snake.
Absolutely. And they, it is leaking a lot, contrary to what they will tell you. But when you turn on your tap water, oil shouldn't come out.
Or catch on fire.
Correct. And it does. And that just goes to say they were pushing Indigenous people off land that's protected by treaties. It's protected by the Fort Laramie Treaty. And every reservation and almost every tribe has a reservation designated for them or multiple. Those are all protected by treaty rights. So the government has a tendency to sign treaties to keep natives on their land. And then, you do your own thing. Oh, wait, you have oil. You're not going to do your own thing. Or, oh, wait, you have open land we can test radiation on. You're not going to do your own thing. It is right outside of Pine Ridge. There is some flat land in the Badlands that is, I think it's 96%. It's very high. So don't quote me on the exact percent, but it is uranium. So it is uranium dust that is blowing directly onto the reservation, causing all kinds of cancer, birth defects, all kinds of problems that, again, Indian Health Services is not capable of treating.
Okay, let me add in, because we're kind of drifting in, but the second part of what he's saying, which is, right on, is that the Amish are immigrants. That's the difference. We're indigenous of this continent.
Right, by definition,
Period.
We were here
40,000 years. And then they had the audacity to require us to submit for citizenship, and finally got it approved by Congress in 1924. That's insane. That's the difference.
Well, and that's why it's always been, I think, so astounding for me that immigrants are treated better than the first inhabitants. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. You can't discover, something that has people on it. We found him.
He was lost.
He was supposed to be in India. So I don't know what happened and how he wound up here.
Touted as being a nautical genius.
Right. Somehow, how far is it from Puerto Rico to India? 60,000 miles.
So I hope we answered your question.
Yes.
Mike.
Keep on asking. We love these questions. It lets us know what we should delve more in depth into. We can get into all kinds of things, from the Indian Child Welfare Act, which he was a representative for many, many years, which pretty much guarantees the legal right of Indigenous children to not be adopted into white families.
Well, it's a lot more than that. But
well, absolutely. That's the summary of it.
And
then the whole goal of it is to protect Indigenous culture. How do you stop, how do you eradicate a group of people? The best way to do that is to take the children and forced assimilation.
Well, aside from that, there was forced sterilization.
Of course there was.
From 72 to 76. Look it up on Google.
50, 60%? Probably even higher than that.
No, well, it was focused on a specific age. So from 15, 16 on to about 24, 25. I don't remember the exact figure on that.
It's very high.
But it's very high. And a lot of, I had a young, well, not young lady, she was my age, that used to travel to some of the colleges that I spoke at. And she was a part of that. She was sterilized and gave her own personal viewpoint of it. The fact that, of course, she wanted children, the fact that that was denied by the government. That
through no choice.
Absolutely.
It's not like they said what was going on.
They were either tricked into signing it, the parents, for a toothache or a headache, or they just went ahead and did it forcibly. So, and I have documents on that too. It's just so hard to try to remember everything. I wish we could do this like every week for a couple of years, because then we can cover a big part. But I mean, just this document alone with the chronology, we can go through one step at a time.
Well, pass me that, and I'm going to read off the subtitles of it. And if anyone wants to go more in depth on anything, we can. This will give us a really good idea of what we want to talk about. Starting here, we can talk about the occupation of Alcatraz Island. We can talk about the Bureau of Indian Affairs takeover in Washington. We can talk about.
Well, there's a list. There's a long list, and if you look at the chronology, you'll see all those different things. Now, it only goes up to 79, because from that point on.
Oh, the takeover of Mount Rushmore would be a good one.
That from that point on, I was so embedded in work at the Indian Center. I worked 10, 11 hours a day, that I wasn't able to do as much as I, as far as keeping documentation on everything. I have it, but I have never really comprised it to, and I should make a book out of it.
Right? Oh, what we should talk about a little bit today is Leonard Pelletier.
Well, I think we need a whole hour for that, because.
So let's do this. If you guys would like to hear about a political prisoner named Leonard Pelletier, let Allison or let us know in the chats. And we can definitely do a separate 45 minutes about that, because that is a journey. So just a brief summary to know whether or not we want to talk about that. He was an American Indian movement person who allegedly shot and killed 2 federal officers, but he didn't do it. He wasn't even in the state when it happened.
Right.
and they convicted him, and he was in Canada, and all kinds of false statements were made to get him extradited back, and it was a nightmare. So if you guys want to hear about that, we can definitely talk more about that as well in another video, because that's a very long discussion. What else we could talk about? We already kind of talked about Wounded Knee in the last video. We could delve a little more into that.
Well, let's see if we have any more questions.
I didn't see any pop up.
Oh, it'll show up on the screen.
Down at the bottom.
Yeah, I haven't seen any pop up yet. But I think just for the sake of time, only because we only have about like 25 more minutes left. If anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to post them in the chat, or if you're watching this after the fact, please feel free to comment them down below, and I will pass them along to Jeff and Robert for them to answer. So if you're watching this, after the live events already happened, still feel free to ask questions or comment as you see appropriate. But I feel like just because we are kind of running a little bit low on time, I feel like we should, maybe pick one of the topics that you guys wanted to go through, or maybe even go through the chronology, whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Okay, well, I have a good idea. But before that, if you guys have any questions, you can also reach out to us directly on Facebook through Cleveland Native Americans, Ohio American Indian Movement, Cleveland American Indian Education Center, and People Not Mascots. Between the two of us, we pretty much run the Indigenous community here in Ohio. And lately I've been dragged into West Virginia and Tennessee as well. So
I would like to make an announcement that we're having a demonstration about Chief Wahoo this next week, May 7th, actually.
7th?
It's May 7th at
5.
Yeah, at 5
That's
o'clock.
right, at 5.
And it's going to be on Bolivar Road. So if you really want to get a feel of racism in Cleveland,
Stop by.
Stop there.
We've had beer thrown at us. We've been spit on. We've had fights. It's really, if anyone ever wants to understand what it's like from the other side, and if anyone who's ever said to me, racism doesn't exist in Cleveland, I beg you to come to one of our demonstrations, because you will see undoubtedly with your own eyes. Helen Keller would know.
I also made a movie in 2004. It's called Wahoo. And I told you I was going to send you one too.
With a
Wahoo,
question mark.
nothing sacred. And I forget about things. But in the movie's free. So if you send us an address, we'll send it to you. It's an hour and 7 minutes. But Russ is in there. A lot of community people are in there. But what we also have candid shots of people attacking us, speaking to us, even joining us. And
that happens too, as much with the band. We've had people stop by and pick up a sign, and
and a matter of fact, we had
talk about Pedro.
Okay, but as a matter of fact, we a lot of schools that contacted us to speak at their school about Native Americans and about Chief Wahoo. Pedro Rodriguez was at the demonstration one year, about 5 years ago. And I was on the East 9th side, and he walked over dressed up like a clown.
He was wearing, I vividly remember this, it was atrocious. He was wearing a headdress. He had blue paint, white paint, red paint, and his headdress was from like Party City, or it was very, very demeaning. He was wearing a white sweatshirt with a caricature of old school Chief Wahoo, which was the yellow-faced, vulgar Chief Wahoo.
Beady-eyed, hook-nosed,
and there's a picture of him and Robert where he's like this, scolding him, and he's sitting there just with his, or standing there rather, with just with your arms crossed. So if anyone wants that picture, we can send that to you too.
Well, it's on Facebook too. Just just look for Pedro Rodriguez home day, and
or just Cleveland Indians protest, probably.
If you go on the Cleveland Native Americans,
I'm sure
it's on there too. And every year that pops up when people talk about this year. I guess the Cleveland Indians said, we're not going to allow people to dress up like that. They had a picture of somebody else dressed up like that in another city. And I'm like, okay, why don't you show Cleveland and show what's happening here in Cleveland and show the Pedro thing? Because, and what's really interesting about that picture with Pedro is a young boy, probably 12 or 13 years old, sketched that exact picture in a pencil, and that showed up too with his name. Somebody posted that, and it was really coincidental. It was so crazy to see that, and I had my hair braided, and this guy's standing across. We're looking at each other,
and he was nasty. He was mean.
Well, what happened?
And then he came back a few years later.
The next year, he came back to the opening day, and he did not have his stuff on, his head feathers or anything. Fake regalia. And he came up to me and he apologized to me. And I was shocked. I was stunned by it. And he said I was wrong. After talking to a lot of people, I realized that I made a mistake and I'm here to apologize. And somebody in the background yells, "We can't hear you." So somebody brought up a microphone and they yelled again. Say it again. I
think that was me that yelled. "We
can't hear you." 4
4
times he apologized through that megaphone because people kept asking. They didn't hear it, or what's this about? And it was just kind of amazing. It's in the Scene magazine as well. I was really floored because when I first saw him, I was so upset. I walked towards him. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I really wanted to punch him, but I don't do that. But I was so upset that by the time I got to him, I had cooled down because I probably was going to give him a piece of my mind. And I said to him, do you know how ridiculous you look? And then we had, an exchange.
We had a normal back and forth that gets heated and aggressive.
No aggression there, but
no physical aggression.
No, but he was adamant about his position. I'm honoring you, and I'm like, no, you're not. That doesn't honor us. You're mocking our religion. You're mocking us as a race of people. You're mocking our children. And
as I've said before, and as I've said to him, and as I've said to everybody, when you characterize a group of people as a caricature, you dehumanize the entire group of people. Right. If the group of people you're honoring are telling you how we feel and it is not honor, then it cannot possibly. How do you have the right to tell me how to feel as an Indigenous person? How do you have the right to tell anyone how they have, how they should feel? It's unacceptable. But we have some fun down at the demonstrations too.
Well, the last one a couple of weeks ago was fun. That was a lot of fun. People came up to us. You're dealing, if you have family members, there's always a drunk at somebody's family member.
Yes,
try communicating with the drunk. So
he was there for like 20 minutes and his family is like, "Come on, let's go, come on." And he's just standing there. He's not yelling or, anything like that.
Drunk.
He's just drunk.
But we run into that all the time. Most of the people there are inebriated. And as the time goes on, so if you have the opening, the what do they call it?
If they let you in at like...
when they start the game.
First pitch? I don't know.
When they have the first pitch or whatever, probably 15, 20 minutes before that, everybody's rushing to get in. And they can't even walk. They're so inebriated. They're propping each other up, and then they're trying to converse with us. They're trying to have some kind of dialogue, and it's ridiculous because.
Or they walk by and just flip you off.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of that
stuff.
But if they do come and yell, generally they yell at the women.
They don't yell at me or him.
They don't say anything.
And last time his daughter and I are very, very close. Someone had the mistake of yelling at her, which she doesn't need me, but. But I said to pick on someone your own size, and over he comes waddling. And we have I guess co-demonstrator, as it were, who is one of the attorneys that's filed a lot of lawsuits with us against the team.
All of them, actually.
And he has so much spunk I've never seen. He always goes, "Jesus loves you," or "God loves you," and he'll just yell it. He's the nicest man.
Joe Meissner.
As mean as anyone will be, he will just yell that.
Joe Meissner filed the first lawsuit in 1972. And I always refer to the first lawsuit as 1971, but in 1971, that's when we were strategizing. The board, Russel Means, a whole lot of people. and Joe Meiser would sit at the big table at the Indian Center, the conference room, and strategize on how we're going to file the suit. And Joe Meisner actually brought an artist conception of different ethnic groups. So the Cleveland blacks with the big hair. And
We
the
still
bones
have
with their
that
nose.
sign.
No, well, no, we don't have that one.
I just
we
saw
have
it.
one.
He has one.
But he might have the original. I don't have the original.
I just saw it.
It
You
was-
held it.
It was burnt in the fire at Marla's.
Marla started.
She set it on
Okay.
fire, had it burned.
So I wonder if he was holding a reprint.
So, and I was, at that time, I was really skeptical about saying, that's why make fun of other ethnic groups? That's what we're doing essentially.
Absolutely.
And I was against it. But you know what? It's now reached to the point that the reality of it is far more important than it was then, because you were considerate of people's feelings. And now it's not that we're not considerate, but you just show it the way it is.
Yeah.
You let people see how this has impacted us by being characters or shown as characters or whatever. We're not characters, we're people. We're not mascots, and my children are not mascots.
And that's how the founding of the group People Not Mascots came about.
Right. Well, we've been using that name for 20 years, and then we finally incorporated it. So it's but anyway, People Not Mascots has a lot of information on it. We are building a website. It's not complete yet, but that'll have 990 documents in it about the Chief Wahoo issue. For people that try to downplay it, no, we have documents on it.
That would be another good one. If you guys want to have another episode about just, our activism against the Cleveland baseball team, we can do that as well. That I think would be very interesting. As we're going so far, does anyone have any other questions? Oh, wow. Perfect timing, isn't it?
Yeah,
She'll read it.
that's great. So Mike has another question. What are the principles that AIM is fighting for today, and how do we move towards reconciling?
Reconciling what?
Yeah. So when he says reconciling, what I think he means is everyone living together in peace and harmony. That will never happen as long as we do not do what the government wants you to do, which is die. The government wants Indigenous people to die. That is why they've done what they have done. As far as what does AIM do, and active, I guess, put our energy towards, is removing, first and foremost, here in Cleveland, our AIM group. First and foremost is removing that vile caricature and name from the Cleveland baseball team. Number two is helping all of the community get registered to vote, making sure they're able to do that. Then we also have delivering food, which also is done through, I'm the executive director of the American Indian Education Center now. We do food deliveries around the holidays and Christmas parties to make sure that the kids can get some toys and coats and anything the community needs. They know they can approach us for, and we'll try and figure out a way to help.
So I don't see you have to look at the two levels of reservation Indians versus urban Indians. So reservation Indians, the first thing they want is IRA. IRA is Indian Reorganization Act. And so it's different than the traditional government you have here. IRA is compared to traditional tribal government is a clash. It's a concept that
It's foreign to us.
It assimilates us into this governmental body. So a lot of tribes don't want it. The Cherokee Nation, a number of tribes are handling their own government affairs, have an infrastructure that they've built that completely addresses that, and that includes the Ho-Chunk Winnebagos, which had an outstanding year going into the private sector and then also onto the reservation.
Well, and that brings up my problem with assimilation. I hate that word. I hate when people say America is a melting pot. When you melt together, each thing loses its flavor. America should be a salad bowl. I know that's really stupid, and hopefully I made some of you laugh, but it really should be a salad bowl. And that is what AIM tries to do. We try and make sure that every single Indigenous person has their culture, has a voice, and is represented.
In answer to your question, Mike, and I'm kind of speculating, but if you really want to, if we want to see a solution, so that would include yourself and of course us, is that simply honor the treaties, honor the 361 treaties that have never, ever been honored by the US government.
That is a fun
That's
piece
a
of
start.
that is a
That's
fun
a
piece
start.
of trivia. Not a single treaty in history has ever been upheld.
Not one, not one. I think with the new administration that we now have, and we have natives in some very good positions that
I brought that up last time. Deb Haaland, the
right,
Department of Interior, I think
that
it
can
is.
work with the tribal communities and work with the US government. So again, we are sovereign nations. We are a government within a government within a nation. We have our own police, we have our own judges, we have our own laws, we have our own
Chairman.
constitutions. Matter of fact, the US Constitution was plagiarized.
It was copied off the Iroquois Confederacy.
Yeah, look it up.
It
Look it
was.
up, word
Also,
for word.
Fun fact, tomorrow in Akron, there's going to be a powwow. If you guys would like to come down and meet us there, we will be there as well. You're going to get there around 11-ish.
I'll be there at 11.
I'm going to get there probably around like 1. Because I had some last minute stuff pop up, but
Those that don't know what a powwow is, originally it was started by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and a lot of natives that were living on the reservations and growing and farming and herding needed a source to sell their wares, and so the Bureau of Indian Affairs promoted this powwow type thing where Indians would come together, different tribes. And because we have so many different languages, it's difficult to communicate. We communicate through singing. So the drums, you have the northern style and the southern style of singing, but then you have a singing that doesn't use words at all. And that allows us to, the drum is sacred to us. It's our message to the creator. Every time that drumstick hits the drum, the dancers' toes touch the floor. It's our way of praying. So it brings unity, it brings the people together, and they sell their stuff. Later on, I put 6 powwows on at Cleveland Edgewater for 16 years. Later on, it became a source of education. I mean, my goal was to educate Indians and non-Indians about who we are and traditionalism, traditional life. And so we brought in native dancers from all over the country, 300 different nations. We brought in traditional foods and arts and crafts. So we have laws that protect our arts and crafts, because so many people are trying to
knocking it off.
Right, they're knocking it off and they're making money out, mostly foreign. And
a lot of Chinese people and Tibetan people especially have been making nickel silver bracelets for the last 20 years and setting them with fake turquoise and selling them for $800 as American Indian art. So we have
there's a law that protects
protection.
1993, 1978, the Indian Arts and Crafts Law.
But if you Google Akron, Ohio Powwow 2021, you'll see the flyer and get the address, and we'd love to see you there. Come up and talk with us. They'll be dancing, I'm sure.
Traditional dancing.
Yeah. I know one of our friends, Mary High Elk, is a jeweler and beater, and she'll be there selling some of her work. We have a woman who's indigenous to Bermuda. She'll be there selling some of her stuff. So if you've ever wanted to just kind of get a feel for, our community in depth outside of a demonstration setting, this is the perfect opportunity.
Excellent. I would love to attend one of those. I have another work obligation tomorrow, literally from 11 to 12. So I don't think I'll be able to make
it. Ends at 4.
We could write you a note.
I wish. But maybe the next one. Do you have them over the summer as well, or?
Well, they're
sporadic.
I mean, the best powwows to go to are on reservations.
Yeah.
You have a lot of powwows in New York, upper
They
New
have the
York.
great ones in
In
New
Michigan, they have
Mexico.
a lot in Michigan. So I'm looking at something that's close
Oh.
for people to drive to.
New York has good ones. Northern Michigan has that really, really
They
good
have
one.
great powwows in northern Michigan.
Was that Ojibwe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Ohio doesn't have any reservations. We have about maybe 35 different nations here. But again, the only powwow that we had some 15,000 people there. It had some really high numbers, and that brought in a lot of dancers from all over the United States. Was our powwow, which again we did for 16 years. It's a long time.
There's always the Mohican powwow, but I think that already happened.
No, they have it twice. There's probably one coming up, and then they have another one in
think so.
September or November.
Yeah, that's
I
the
have
one
to
was
look
talking
it
about.
up.
Do they do it twice now?
Yeah, they've been doing it twice a
I
year.
didn't know that. So there's the Mohican State powwow. That'll be fun.
It's not a reservation, as
It
they
is not.
tried to fool people into believing. They
Yes.
call it the Mohican Reservation powwow. It's
In
not.
Ohio, they like to use the word reservation when they really mean Metro Park.
No, and it's not a metro park. It's a
No.
campsite. They camp. It's a site.
No,
people
but they
can
have
rent.
like around here, it's South Chagrin
Oh
Reservation.
yeah. The state has used that term,
Yeah.
reservation, but they're not Indian reservations.
Is there a central website where we could find that information?
Yes, powwows.com. Powwows.com.
That should list all of them
It'll
across
have
the
everything
country.
in
I
there.
should think.
Every state, you can pick a state. It'll tell you when to go.
And then there's always like a flyer or a contact number. If you have any questions, you can contact or email or whatever. You can also ask us and we'll do whatever we can to help you.
You can look them up, but please do not dress up like an Indian if you're non-Indian, because
You took the words right out of my mouth.
it's a
Disclaimer.
mockery, and you really won't be accepted if you do.
No, you
could
it
be a
would be a
problem.
problem.
Yeah.
I certainly would have a problem with it. I'm kind of known within our group to be the more outspoken. Some have used the word aggressive.
I would say understatement. That's an understatement.
I have been known to be the more aggressive of the group, so I certainly wouldn't take too kindly to you wearing a Party City headdress.
But
I
we've
think
had
that's
people.
understandable.
I had some couple come in Zorro outfits.
So good.
They had the cape. The only thing they didn't have was the mask. Black shirt, black shoes, black
Cape.
pants, and a cape. And I was like, what are you doing here?
I know.
This is not a Zorro event.
No, they think it's people do that though. They'll come in like cosplay stuff. It's bizarre. It's really strange.
And it's also insulting.
Incredible.
Every part of the regalia, every part of the singing, the music, or the sounds have a meaning, and they're part of ceremonies. And
Like feathers, you don't wear feathers till you've earned them.
right, and if you're not Native American, you can't wear eagle feathers. You
Correct.
can't wear hawk feathers. You can go to prison for 10 years under DNR, Department of Natural Resources. That's federal. You cannot own them. You can go to jail and get a $10,000 fine.
And you
Each
will.
count. And you will. They're very aggressive. They've always come to our powwows and check people out, check the vendors out, check what's being stolen. It's not stolen, what's being sold. So yeah, there are a lot of Indian Child Welfare Acts, one law. There are a lot of laws that protect Native Americans. Some of them don't have teeth, but for the most part.
It's nice to have as a
Yeah.
gesture.
So the Indian Arts and Crafts Law, the one that we spoke of, that actually challenges a lot of these foreign companies,
And
or
holds them
organizations
accountable.
that make that, sells that stuff as Native American, because they can file federal charges against them now.
Well, if I did my math right, we should be coming right down to the wire here. And is there any more questions that we missed that we can answer real quick?
Not that I can see, but if anybody else has any other questions that they want to ask, please make sure you ask it now. It's going to take us a little bit of time just to upload this to YouTube because it is such a large file, but it will be uploaded to YouTube within the next week or so, I promise. And it will be available for free for anybody to view. I just wanted to clarify again, just because I think, especially as somebody who's not Native, Even though if you ask my father, he would tell you that like, oh, you're, a quarter Cherokee. And I'm like, I'm not Native. Like, I don't want to ever pretend that, I'm at all of that. That's not part of my identity. I don't identify that way. And I don't have the ancestral backup to believe that story. But I do want to just clarify. So powwows all over the country are open to non-Native people. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The only time it would be closed off to you is if they feel like you're making a mockery of something.
Understood.
But also, I would be scared to do that because some of those Native women, the aunties, those looks of death, man. Oh my God, it's like daggers in your soul.
You were going to say something else.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I know that, especially, at least in my perspective, I wouldn't know that these were open to the public,
Yes.
especially because, I'm from Ohio. As you mentioned, there's no reservations. There's no formal reservations in Ohio. So I grew up not knowing much about Indigenous culture or about Indigenous populations or anything like that. So I personally wouldn't necessarily know if I would know prior to, obviously meeting you and talking about this sort of stuff. I wouldn't know that I was welcome at a powwow or any of those events. So it's good to know that, those are open for the public as long as you're being
Absolutely.
respectful.
If a powwow is not open to the public, it would just not be listed. But again, I've never heard of a powwow that wouldn't.
No, it's open up to everybody. Some of the dancing is, unless they tell you it's in a tribal, that means anybody can dance. It's really limited to the dancers. The powwows that I like are called competition.
Mm-hmm.
So natives have to prove who they are and they compete for money.
Actually, keep talking
So
for 1
the
second.
goal is to, when I used to do it in Cleveland, the goal was to encourage our children to learn about their culture and traditions and to learn about dancing. Because when you're learning about dancing, you understand the drum, you understand the regalia, we don't call them costumes. You understand what everything means and stands for. And it all centers around Mother Earth and it centers around the Creator. So
I thought I had a jingle shirt over here, but I don't.
and it was successful for me because a lot of our children started to dance, and I like that. I like to see
Yeah.
that.
It carries on tradition and it carries
Oh, I
on
do.
your culture.
Right.
I have a jingle shirt, I think. Is this the shirt? It's the shirt. Jingle shirt. So this is a piece of regalia. It's called a jingle shirt. They are rolled up tobacco can lids.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And the whole point is the jingles promote healing.
Oh.
So when you wear it and you would dance.
Healing dress. Yeah.
That is really interesting.
So I
Thank
just
you for
thought that'd be a
sharing
fun
that.
little prop to show.
Yeah,
That's,
no,
originated-
thank you.
It originated with the Ojibwe Indians, Anishinaabe, through a dream that a young lady had because in her community, a lot of people were dying and she was praying to the Creator, and the Creator asked her to make this jingle dress, and they did. And once they started using this as part of ceremonies, I think the village survived, or the community survived as a direct result of this healing dress.
And most of our regalia that it has evolved but never changed. So when I say evolved, he said jingle dress. This is a jingle shirt, obviously the male version of a jingle dress. I do have a matching skirt for it just because it was sold as a set, so I have it. But I rolled up the lids and myself with my hands and then put them all on the shirt by hand. Regalia is, I would say 90% of our regalia is made by hand.
It's all, yeah.
Otherwise it would not be authentic regalia.
Well, certainly. So Mike has a question. He says, are powwows seen as something apolitical, or is there the option to educate non-natives on the history of white occupation and the issues that natives still face?
So I definitely wouldn't walk up to just any native at a powwow and be like, So what do you think? I definitely wouldn't do that. But someone that you know is like us, politically active, always look for an AIM patch. You know, if you see an AIM patch, most of the time they're more than willing to talk with you about, you know, contemporary and historical issues.
Powwows are not political.
No.
They're educational. They're culturally and traditionally. Can't think of the word.
They're a competition.
Well,
now.
Anyway,
they're spiritual.
Yeah, and spiritual, but we use that to educate our youth. And the powwows are a great way of getting together with families. So we know natives from all over the country. When they come to a powwows, we get to hang out a little. They're
a blast.
They're not. I think at one time when I first started putting powwows on, we would have grand entry and we'd come in with a flag upside down. And if you understand the concept of that, it's a military concept. And having a flag upside down means you're in distress. AIM has used that for a long time. But because most people didn't understand why I did it or what it was about, I discontinued it. Because unless they really knew. So you're going to see that picture of flags upside down in the other venues as well. And that's what it means. It means that we're in distress. That's what it means.
But powwows are first and foremost not political.
No, they're a lot of fun. A lot of good food, a lot of Indian food, a lot of good food.
Oh, it's very fun.
A lot of aunties.
I know we're gonna eat a lot tomorrow.
That sounds interesting, and I'm very jealous that I can't go this time, but I will try and make the next one. I'm sure that we're going to keep in contact after this, so definitely let me know. But we are going to have to wrap this up. We have hit 7:00. So I just wanted to thank you both again for sparing another Friday night. Unfortunately, it's a little cold and gloomy today. The sun's trying to come out. But I wanted to thank you both again for sharing your expertise and your time with us. It's something that I feel a lot of people want to know more about, but don't know how to ask or don't have the right opportunities to ask. So I really thank you guys for putting this on and speaking freely and answering questions and, you know, just giving us an outlet for people to ask. I think that that's kind of the best way forward is to understand, and we understand by listening. So thank you again for speaking and for being so free with your time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us and giving us this platform. We appreciate it.
We do
immensely.
Thank you.
And look forward to future discussions about other topics. So everyone stay tuned.
Of course. So I am going to thank you again, and we'll see this on YouTube coming up.